Hey, thanks for coming to the session of the Media Production Hive. So first, let me introduce our speaker, Dr. Yonty Friesem. He is the Associate Director at the Media Education Lab and an Assistant Professor of Multimedia Production at the Department of Communication, Central Connecticut State University. He received his PhD from the Joint Doctoral Program in Education at the University of Rhode Island and Rhode Island College. Yonty is an award-winning educator and a filmmaker who advocates for media literacy education. For the past 18 years, Yonty has worked with a number of youth media organizations, universities, and colleges in Israel. As part of his educational work, advocacy, and research, Yonty has presented at international conferences in Oxford, UK, Turku, Finland, and Guangzhou, China. So welcome, Dr. Yonty Friesem.
Thank you. So excited to be here. I think the connection started in the Northeast Media Literacy Conference that we had at Central in February. So I'm happy to do the connection that for me, as you're going to see, I'm going to make the argument in the next 10-15 minutes about the connection between media literacy, which is the field that I'm coming from, and information literacy. And then we're going to go to the actual model and a lot of examples. Before we start, I want a little bit to know my audience. It's part of media literacy to know who you're talking to. So if you can just introduce yourself and why are you in this session? What are your expectations to gain out of this session?
My name is Xu Jian. I'm working at Worcester State University. I'm a teacher and learning librarian. This topic is really attracts me because it's a topic I've never seen in other conferences or meetings, and also very. I think it will be a very useful concept for teaching.
Oh, sorry. Well, I got distracted. What was the question?
I saw
an important email. And I got
no problem.
I started in my current position as a reference librarian about 8 months ago, and so I'm new to information literacy, but I'm also interested in the media side, like media and technology as well. So just seeing how those two combine.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy Rudnick, University of Hartford, head of the Allen Library, which is a music and performing arts library. I do library instruction, reference, all that, and supervise people who are doing it. And I'm just always looking for new ways to reach out to patrons, getting to where they are.
My name's Jasmine Huff, but actually not a librarian yet. Hoping to be one day. And I kind of just picked this because I think it's something I do a lot with, or I work a lot with as a student. I go to the University of Hartford and actually do an internship there.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christine Edwards. I actually work at Central Connecticut State. So interested in learning more about the education lab, as well as I have a particular love of media and film, so I'm always interested to know what is going on in media education.
Sharon Clapp, Central Connecticut State University, and I had the pleasure of going to a good portion of your Northeast Media Literacy conference at Central because you hosted it there, and I was like, media literacy, and I'm always trying to work on a little bit of just wherever possible or appropriate, if needed or helpful, put in a little bit of digital literacy related to things like sort of more commercial web stuff, how that's constructed, and get that piece into the information literacy. And so it's neat to see kind of how these things are fitting together. And I'm really, really happy that, different people talk to you and that you're at this conference, because I think there's really good crossover.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bianca from the University of Richmond. I'm a librarian here. I just started teaching information literacy, so just want to learn about a new way to engage students and incorporate that into the curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, I get on the mic here. I'm Debbie Herman. I'm Director of Library and Educational Technology here. So I wear two hats. We do a lot of multimedia production here. So I too, like Sharon, am interested in the intersection between information and media literacy.
Cool, thank you. So I plan to do like a 15-minute, very academic learning goal. So if it's too much, I can rush it and go more into the actual examples. There's a lot about practicality about how to do it that I'm going to share here and there, but I'm always happy if you want to reach out to me. My email is my last name at ccsu.edu, and my Twitter that I'm using quite a lot is my first name. So just do Yonty on Twitter and you'll find me and all my website information and how to contact me. And I'll stay afterwards if you need anything. I shared with you the Media Education Lab smartphone. And if you go to the mediaeducationlab.com, you'll have tons of resources for media literacy education for different ages. The founding director, Renee Hobbs, just issued a book called Create to Learn, and it's about how to use production to learn a different competency in the higher education. So I think you can back order it now, and it should be like issued in less than a month. So again, there's tons of resources there that you can find. Now, this talk is based upon a paper that was just issued like 2-3 weeks ago. If you want, this is the short link to the paper itself, and then I elaborate on all the things that I'm going to talk today. If I missed anything, this is a more reflective theoretical paper that explains like the best way that you can use the media production Hive, and you have it also on my website, digitalempathy.net. So to make the argument and the connection, why am I here in this conference, I looked at two interesting recent publications. One is the task force to review the information literacy competency standards, and I love their like blurb definition of how to look at information literacy. So the integrated abilities, the reflective discovery, understanding how information is produced, value, the use of information for creating new knowledge, participating ethically, but also in a community of learners. So I think it really encompasses a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about and the things that I'm looking at when I'm working with students to produce different content. Another resource that is more recent is the framework that of the ACRL, and then they have those different standards, but the ones that really were important for me is this, because my claim is that there is less attention to the effective. I'm not diminishing from the cognitive, but that's something that we do like all the time, and there's not enough attention to the effective, and you'll see how I'm combining them together with also a social aspect to it. And then also the idea of the student as a creator and curator. So looking and putting the emphasis on the student. So those two definitions are the ones that I'm looking at how I'm going to do the connection that I'm going to show you now. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to blast you with different learning goals in order to explain what were my influences when I created this model that I'm going to share with you. So it might look weird, but then eventually there's going to be some kind of sense to it. So I'm starting backwards with the Institute of the Future, claiming that those are the competencies or the skills for the workplace that we're looking for. So if you're talking about high school students, undergraduate, graduate students, those will be the competency, the skills that they'll need to know. So you can see here different ones. So there's the new media literacy that is connected to what we're doing, design mindset, social integration. There's like different ones. But this is something that we need to pay attention to, because as we working with students, mainly their goal is to be hired what beginning to be a more and more difficult task. There was just like I think it was New York Times that says that having a college degree is less and less like an insurance to get a job, and the investment in a college degree doesn't really reimburse itself, or kind of. So it's kind of tough time. In addition to that, to make things even worse, I don't know if you know this book, Howard Gardner, The Multiple Intelligence, did with his former PhD student, now a Berkman Center at Harvard fellow. They interviewed 500 youth and talked about their use of media, digital media. They found that with all the progress and things that are great with digital media, there's three main issues that need to be addressed. And one is that there is less and less development of imagination. There is less and less, there is a struggle with identity. How do you identify yourself? And then the third one is intimacy. So those three areas with using digital media are something that they here and there offered some things to do, but in general they just raised the issue that using digital media is great for connection and being involved in maker movement and everything, but we need to pay attention to those three areas, which is imagination, identity, and intimacy. Which, again, I'm going to talk about it later. This book, Douglas Rushkoff, Viral Media. So this is not his recent book. The recent book is Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, about the digital economy and how all those companies like Facebook and Google are using our free labor to get profit and grow, and what we need to do to change that. But this book, Present Shock, is talking about the fact that we have to be engaged all the time, and we actually are in a state of shock. And so we cannot really do anything because we need all the time to look what happened on the feed and answer and like and engage. And if there's a research that shows for kids, if you don't get a like in 10 seconds, it's a rejection. So then it has consequences. So it's really difficult to act in this kind of environment. And then the last one is Shirley Turkle, Along Together. If you know her book, this is her more recent book about reclaiming conversation. She was a very technology integration, Rushkoff as well, and now she's a little bit more concerned about the way it's used. And she's saying that what needs to be happening is to use the technology for us to take control over it. And Rushkoff said the same thing about humanizing technology and not having the technology control us. So we see the skills that we need to teach the students, but at the same time we have all those concerns, and I'm not talking about internet addiction and all those issues that are also a big thing that's starting to rise. One of the solutions that I like to look at is Daniel Goleman and Peter Senge, which are two very different people that decided to collaborate. So Peter Senge is system thinking, about 5 habits of how to develop system thinking and thinking about how organization works. And Daniel Goleman is emotional intelligence, social intelligence. Not that he created it, he just made it popular. And they collaborated on working on, this is a very small book that is a kind of teaching guide of how to address the deficits in our students, and mainly the way that they looked at is focus. That's the issue. So they looked at everything that the other scholars said, and they said we need to address 3 areas of focus. And if you do that, the students will be able to have leadership skills and be able to maintain well-being. So the first focus is in the inner, learning to reflect, learning to understand what you are, what happens with you, and what's going on. Then the second one is focus on the other, and that's empathy. And that's where I come in because that's my interest. My big research is about how to enhance empathy skills through production and digital tools. And then the last one is the outer, which is system thinking. So eventually what they're saying is, if you focus on yourself, the other, and the world, the outer, then you'll be able to maintain yourself in a well-being in the world. And that's how to address the issues that were researched and show concern. So that's all great, but it's very theoretical. So how actually do you do that? So I want to share with you, I'm gonna share with you a video that a student of mine at Central became a media literacy teacher in Simpson-Waverly Community Learning School. It's in North Hartford, and it was being talked that the school is going to be closed this year. So what he did, he took his 8th grade students and they created a video to show to the school board. And the school board assured a month ago that they're not going to close the school now. It was not just the movie, there was a whole work that Central is doing with the school itself. They came twice, the students came twice to Central. We have students in education who are coming, in social work who are coming and helping also. So this is a 2.5-minute video that the kids did with their teacher. And they work mainly in the library. They don't have a librarian there, which is, they have a beautiful library, but no money to have a librarian. So my students acted as more the media library specialists, not just the librarian working with the books, but making with them, teaching them about literacy in different ways. And that's one of the capstones that they did.
Good morning, Sister Waverly Staff and Scholars. Today is Thursday, April 6, 2017.
Okay, so that's not going to work. So basically, the movie 2.5 minutes, they interviewed, they got people, the daughter of Simpson-Waverly, social activist, a former principal of the school, different community members to talk about why the school is important, why neighborhood school is important, and they created a kind of manifesto online after they did the research to show why the school should be open and how to celebrate the work in the school, and not saying, oh, we're poor and you need to like help us keep the school open. No, it was actually a great celebration of why the school is awesome and how it contributes to the community. So that's an example of one work, and this is with middle school. I'm going to try, I know that most of you are academics, so as we go later, I'll show you work with undergraduate, but I'm going to show you that it can work with elementary kids, kindergarten, middle school. It works in every constellation that you would think of. So before I show you example, what is media production? So there's different definitions, but generally when people are talking about media production, they're talking about a process of brainstorming, pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution, which is broadcasting. This is the Hollywood model, the industry model. And what I'm really fighting for is to say that doesn't work in academic or high school or middle school or elementary school, because this is not a superhero movie that we're creating and everybody knows their job and they're just, each one is doing what they need to do. We're teaching how to make a message, a media message. The learning process is the whole idea and not the product. So this doesn't work. And media production can be, you would hear digital storytelling that will use also the same model. So when we say digital storytelling, when we say media production, it's basically the same thing. And the problem is that we're using the wrong way of looking at it because we're using the professional way, because most of the people who are teaching production learning film school or in TV and journalism, so they learn the professional way, but they didn't learn the pedagogical way of how to teach to do it. They know how to do it, but know how to teach to do it. And that's where the gap is that I'm trying to solve with this model. So media production, I'm going to show you mainly videos, if the sound will work, but media production is any mediated communication that convey a message. So that can be a PowerPoint, that can be a website, a podcast, a presentation, music, anything that is mediated. Another process that I was influenced because of my interest in empathy, and I don't know if you know about this one, is the human-centered design. This comes from IDEO and Stanford D School, Design School. This is a link to a guide that explains each one of those if you're interested. But the idea is that you need to empathize with your client, then you define what is the thing that you're designing, you ideate what you want to do, you create a prototype, you test it, and then you do again to make sure that it works. And again, this is to design a product like a car or a computer. Working in an educational setting, not really. They tried to adopt it, but I didn't feel that it was really working that well. So that was not helpful for me. And then I went to special education because I'm working a lot with kids with special needs. And then I looked at executive functioning. Anybody knows about executive functioning? So the idea is there's not a big agreement about what is exactly executive functioning, but it comes from brain injury research about what are the skills that you need to finish successfully a task. And so different scholars are identified differently. I use the brief, which is the test that used a lot in special education, how to test students' executive functioning. And for them, it's behavior regulation, and you can see that inhibit, shift, and emotional control. Those are the things that you want to teach the students. And this is where I'm saying that we need to add the effective part to information literacy to think about those things. If a kid doesn't know how to regulate himself or herself, they won't be able to even sit and listen to what you're saying. If something happened in their house or with whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, so they won't be really attentive. So there's something about learning how to shift, inhibit, and emotional control. But then cognitively, they're talking about the ability to monitor, to organize, to plan, working memory, and initiate. Which again, if you want people to know how to research, how to validate sources, they need to know how to do all those things. Which sounds very basic, but still sometimes those might be one of other executive functioning that doesn't work for our students, and that's why they're not getting to the task that we want them to get. So then I went to most classical model of like learning outcome, and that's the Bloom taxonomy. So we're going back to 56, and we can see that it's not really working. And I was amazed in my studies when I learned that it was actually an effective book also that a lot of people ignore. So everybody talks about this part, but actually there's 3 books. There is the cognitive, there's the effective, and there is the motor skills that they issue. But everybody's talking about the cognitive and leaving those alone. So we can see that the emotional ones are sounding kind of the executive functioning, and it's interesting to look at it in a way. But this is, again, 56. It's kind of old now. And there is a revision of the Bloom taxonomy from 2001. And you can see here that the new revision put creating as the upper skill to do and remembering the lower skill. And as we go up, so when we're thinking about what we want our students to learn, so we can start from remembering, but eventually we want them to learn to create, which would be the synthesis of everything else that they did to find the resources, how they create by themselves, because they know how to evaluate, but now how can you create, which is an upper level skill. And then emotionally, before that, there is in 2008, there was Chorch's created the Bloom taxonomy for digital taxonomy. So he added this, but also added communication that needs to happen. That it's another skill that needs to be there. And then I'm adding the social and emotional learning core competencies that are self-management, self-awareness, responsibility, decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So all of that is tons of information and tons of different things, and how do you combine them together? So my big influences are Renee Holtz that I mentioned before. She was my advisor, and now we're working together at the lab. as the co-directors. So that's her model of digital and media literacy competency. You need to know to access, analyze, evaluate, create, reflect, and act. She tried to make it as simple as possible so that it can be used in different ways. Those are the competency, but also the production process in a way. And then I was influenced by another committee member, which is Julie Corro, who together with Renee Hobbs and myself, we have the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy in Providence at the University of Rhode Island every summer. If you want to hear about that, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. We have now, I think 60% of the participants are librarians that are coming to learn about the different ways. So Julie is publishing at the end, like next year, her new book about personal inquiry. And she took all the influence that I talked about and created this model that, again, all those words, if you see, there's a lot of repetition and a lot of things that are kind of working one with the other. So I took all of that and I created it with this model. So I wanted to take all those skills and how those skills work with focusing on the inner, the other, and the outer. Does that make sense so far, kind of? Okay. So what I created is a model with 19 competencies that might be really overwhelming, but as you're going to see, it makes sense when you look at it as a learning process, that each step that the students are doing something, we want them to enhance a certain skill that they'll know after doing this part of the learning. So I want to show you, I'll start with the first one. So the first skill that I'm talking about is access, right? If students don't know how to use the cameras, and I'm going to talk about video, but again, it's the same thing about web design, it's the same thing about creating a music, everything works the same way. But specifically, I'm going to give you, I thought to focus only on one type of medium, because if not, it's going to be too difficult to look at. So how to know how to use the equipment, right? So they need to have the access skills for themselves. But then they need to analyze with another person to understand what is the message that later on they're going to do. They need to look at other examples to analyze those examples and say, okay, because if you give a camera to a student and saying, do something, they either do usually either transgressive messages because they have the power with the camera, so let's fool around, or they'll think, oh, let's do something interesting like a horror movie. But if you have them sit and analyze other messages and seeing and really learning about the camera angles and the thing, that will inspire them later on to do something that is related with what actually they want to do. So you need to have them analyze and then, going backwards, explore. They need to explore how they can use the examples that they've seen and the equipment. So when I'm starting and I'm teaching students, I give them equipment, have them goof around with the equipment to learn how to use it, but then analyze text messages and understanding how they can explore to use that in their own, creating their own message. Any questions so far? Okay. Give you an example of kindergarten. Hopefully the sound will work. Goes on and on. So the idea was the kids were super excited about this. Think about those kids were 4-year-olds that are doing research about the animals. Then they're going, the library media specialist, and it's the one who brought his kids to do the studio during the conference. There was the studio there. Narragansett Elementary School in Rhode Island. He has a TV studio in the library. He took his office, So there's the library, and there was his office, and just his office transformed it to a green screen and a TV studio. So that's where they're doing it. Very easy to produce, but the kids had to learn to do a research, to explore before they came to do the production itself. It's not just get a camera and go. And as I'm taking the easier skills, I'm showing you lower levels. As we go to upper level skills, you'll see that I'm using CCSU students and like undergraduate students because it's more sophisticated. So the next step, they learn like how to use the media for now. Now they need to think about an idea. So each one of them ideate like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this. They think about how to do that, but then they need to work together to brainstorm. So they can have their own idea, but to brainstorm, again, that's the social part of how you brainstorm. So you have an idea, but how the other person have an idea, and how do we work together to get the ideas together. And then they need to empathize with other people to think about their target audience, because maybe what the two of them think they'll do, it's cool, but then another person will understand it completely differently. So they do role play, or they try to understand how their messages and how the way to do their messages will be received by their audiences. That's the part where you come in, because if they think to do something and you see that it's inappropriate, instead of saying, oh, it's inappropriate and you shouldn't do that, you do a role play and have them play their grandma or their, I'm always doing like a different kind of person that might be offended, and then they're suddenly, oh, actually it is offensive, it is like not appropriate, it is something that I should maybe change and maybe I should do something else. So starting with the self idea, then the brainstorm as a group, but then also thinking about other people and other audiences and how people might perceive this thing in a different way. I have like quote from research that I did with students about that, but let me show you this example. This is from a camp in Rhode Island. It's called First Star URI Academy. I think UConn has it as well. It's foster kids coming for a month in the library and learning. It's a remedial course to have them get college credit, but also there is media classes that they're learning to create media messages, to analyze media messages. And that's the first year that got to the State House. It got a lot of awards. And with my colleagues, I wrote an article in Yalsa about that, the Young Library Services. So if you're interested, I can give you the link for it. So they work on it. It's a very easy production, and you'll see some of the production are very high quality, some of them are very low, but they did work on like who they are, what's the message they wanted to make, why they wanted to do these messages as part of advocacy for being in the foster care system. That was amazing, received really amazing, because it got a lot of audiences to look at. So again, they worked as a group, a pair of two, and they were the one that created. Each one filmed the other person. So the next step is to take responsibility. Because now you have the idea, you know what you want to do, but who's doing what? So you need to take responsibility as the person who's going to work there, but you need to negotiate with your group. Because you might want to be the director, the other person wants to be the actors, or two people want to be directors. So how do you work on that? And again, it's negotiation skills about who is doing what. And then together you create a plan. How are you going to execute that? So this is that stage of like planning and understanding how all the thing that you want to do is going to be actually produced. This is a project that I did in, a day came to Providence, but it's a group from New Hampshire called Friends Forever that brings youth from conflict area. So Northern Ireland, Israel, which I'm from Uganda. And this is a group from Israeli kids, Arab and Jews, who in 6 hours created this video about their conflict and their experience. So again, it talks about the wall between Israel and Palestine. It talks about the relationship, the road is closed. That was like there, but they used that for their advantage. And the negotiation was really difficult because it was not just a group dynamic here that we're talking, a usual group dynamic, I want to do this, I want to do this. There was also the political issue because it's a group, so that's even harder with a group that it's in conflict or there is some kind of intercultural work there. But again, it's part of how this dynamic works that is really great. They did their research about, they wanted to talk about the wall, they wanted to talk about the different ways of looking at it and how you should use it. Suddenly somebody came up with the idea of using a Charlie Chaplin kind of thing. So they looked online, started to look how it looks like visually, to try to think about how they should do, how they should act. So there was a lot of component of research and planning before they did that. So the next part is the actual creation. So personally, you're creating your message because each one is creating. You're the director, the actor, the light, the sound, whoever part of the group, you're creating by yourself. It's you're the creator, but then together, you need to collaborate so that your creator with the other person's creator will be combined as one coherent message. And then I would call everything together the production. Because when you use just production or media production, you don't think about the individual contribution and then the idea of the collaboration as a group to create this thing. So here is something that Central students did with the Connecticut State. The Connecticut State Police came to us and said, we need a recruitment video. Can you do that? So I took my best students and they went and collaborated with the Connecticut State Police, which was really challenging because to find, you'll see how many things they used there to find a day, to stop the traffic, to do the thing that they wanted to do was really, really challenging. And also undergraduate, think about it, working with troopers and they're afraid of the troopers, but they need to tell them what to do. So there's power dynamic that are very interesting. But the other thing is they need to understand who was the target audience, and the state police came and say, it's for everybody, but he said, no, it doesn't work like that. We need to be very specific. So they started, the way to collaborate with the state police, the client, was to talk and explain who was the target audience, what kind of things. We asked them to show us video that inspired them. So then they show us different videos so we could see what they think to do, and then we did our version that I think was much better. So let me show you part of it. find this wherever the person seconds over there. So the idea is this is a very different quality than the kindergarten video that I showed you. And on purpose, I want to show you different things. It's not about the product. The product can be highly professional and can really not look that good. It's about the learning process. Now, obviously, if you're working with the Connecticut State Police and we would do something that would be the quality of the kindergarten, they wouldn't use it. That got like millions of you on Facebook. So the idea is that you need to think about the target audience, and the students need to think, if it's a project that is about their learning the process, don't worry about the product. But if it has real work, which would be good to look at and to see, then you need to kind of find a balance between it should have standards and should look in a certain way that would be understand, and it's part of empathizing with your audience, the second stage of thinking like, what is the end result? Where are you aiming to do this message? The next part is the editing part, and then the personal, so there is one editor or two editors, but then the group monitor. So the group can see and give their like feedback. No, I think you should have done here this, and so they need to go and reorganize, because the idea is that when you had the idea, you had a certain way that you thought the message should be organized. Once you did the production itself, you have the actual material, then it needs to be reorganized because it's not going to be exactly how you imagine it. I love the way that Woody Allen refers to it. He says that writing the script for a movie, it's the best thing, because after that it's just trying to hold everything to be as close to this, because it's like a disaster, because it always doesn't look the way that you wrote the script. So the same thing here. So in the editing, you need to organize, to monitor, to edit so that it will look as close to what you wanted, because a lot of things happen in the way. So this, okay. This was a workshop for teenagers of learning to create media messages in several hours in Rhode Island. It's every year they're doing it. This year we had this group. It was for the first time that School of Deaf came and joined us, which is very challenging for people who are having disabilities and especially hearing to do audio-visual text. They did another workshop 2 weeks later, and I was doing observations to look with students who are deaf or have hearing impairment. How do they do production? How does that affect them? Is it different than the usual process? And it's very similar. So then almost the last part is to reflect. So you did the message, but a lot of the time, that's where it ends. There's no reflection. And the big learning is during the reflection, to see what you like, what you don't like. You might think that the students love their it doesn't mean they're not critical about that. So the same way they were critical about the resources that they found, they need at the end to be critical about what they did and to be able to articulate it. And so it's important to get feedback from other people, not from themselves, because they might think one thing, and I usually use positive reinforcement because it's really helpful. What happened in the foster kids camp, it was amazing because they did a video, and then one of the kids, they need to use positive sentence, what you love about the video, and then do a suggestion and another thing you love about your video. We call it empathic peer feedback. And what happened is that when they give a suggestion, nobody here, they don't like it, sounds like criticism. But when they say that they liked it, they said, we really loved the music, it was really funny. And of course you want to hear positive things, but then the person was like, what? But it was supposed to be like a horror movie, it was supposed to be like frightening. So actually the positive feedback was helpful because since it's positive, you want to hear positive things, but you can hear that the audience understood it differently, and the feedback helps you to see, oh, actually what I did was not really helping the audience to get to what I wanted to get. So the feedback is really important into that. And then of course sharing. If you don't share it, you won't receive the feedback, and the reflection will be very narrow kind of into what you want to get. The last part, okay, so I'll show you this only. So this is a capstone project from a mid-level class in production at Central. Of course, we won't hear. So Asia is talking about her YouTube channel, and it's a video about herself, how she learned and what she used as skills that she learned at Central to create her YouTube channel, and what kind of equipment and how people are helping her to create that. So it's like a self-reflection that was shared in the class, and there was a whole peer empathic feedback about doing different things, and then she went and changed some stuff according to the feedback that she received. And then the last part is ACT. For me, coming from a critical literacy background, it needs to have some kind of a transformational aspect to it. So you're doing a message, not just to express yourself. A lot of the youth media organizations are about exploring identity and exploring creativity, which is awesome, but I think it lacks the critical component. So we want students to have critical thinking, but also to be activists, again, from my point of view. That's what I look at my students. I want them to make a difference in the world. So if you do all of that, how do you actually make a difference in the world? So that's always, I'm asking in the beginning also, when they're thinking about their idea, how will it really act and do a social change? Or how will it influence other people? So I'm going to share with you the last video for this portion. Hopefully the sound will work. No. So there is heartbeat, and you have a voiceover of the girl and the boy who are going to meet talking on the phone. And she's saying how she's excited to meet this guy. And so the heartbeats get like higher and higher. I guess you can hear now the heartbeat. And then you hear him saying, did I see what just happened? Like, and it's not my business, I shouldn't do like anything. And then you have like and then he's saying again, did I see what just happened? Like, should I do something about it? What should I do about it? So this is part of a project at CCSU called Stand Up CCSU, and we did research with the Office of Victim Advocacy. It was presented at the ARA, the American Educational Research Association, to show that campus-wide they did a campaign, and it was helpful for the students to understand, but the students who created those PSAs got much higher score. And if you create the message, it's much more effective to get an understanding. Here it was about bystander intervention, and we have even a story about one of our students who went to New York to a bar and actually saw a similar situation, and because she did the video, she was like suddenly, oh, I know what to do, like, and she actually did, and it took the girl like outside and took her out of the bar. And again, it's one example that is like more qualitative from the research, but the quantitative research showed really difference in their ability to understand what was the information from the bystander intervention by creating messages for other students. So this is the part of how this project works. There is, of course, much more the nitty-gritty kind of thing about how in each part, how to do that. And I'll be happy to talk with you and share with you how it works in different levels, different projects. What I try to make the argument here is that it works for any student with disability, typical students, kindergarten, elementary, middle, high school, undergraduate, lifelong learners. And the idea is that we need to look at it as a set of competencies that are going through stages and are built one upon each other in a reciprocal way that works on the personal, the empathy, the other person, but also like the outside world. And in a way, that will be a way to really get students to the place that we want to get if we look at the very new and updated definition of information literacy. That students who are going to do and go through this process would have more critical thinking, would have more social responsibility and social skills, but also that have the technical skills to know ethical skills. And yeah, I think that's all the skills that I was talking about. So we have 8 minutes. If you have any questions or any feedback, I would be happy to hear or to answer if you have any questions.
Can you recommend some easy-to-start toolkits or softwares to produce media for in the library?
It depends. If you're talking about video, you can use the most basic ones. So if you're a PC, you can use Movie Maker for editing or iMovie. I use with a lot of students iMovie just to get the beginning. They have a trailer option, and so it's a 1.5 minutes that just gets you to put like, they're saying, here put a close-up, here put a long shot, here, and then it looks like very professional, but it's very basic to just start learning how to do that. And again, if you go to the Media Education Lab, we have a lot of resources and different websites to do. We have now a new website about propaganda, and it has a gallery, and people are now with fake news. It's very important to how you identify, how do you rate that. It's called mindovermedia.tv, and so it lets students rate and have a dialogue with other students about what they think is propaganda and what it's not. And that's looking at videos, but also pictures and websites. We have for middle schoolers, girls, it was with the Department of Health, my pop-up video, how to create like very basic like music videos and magazines. And so there's a lot of entry-level activities to do. And again, I can give you many more resources if you want to. I gave you here, this is the way that we're using for analyzing media, and you can see that there's different media types. So you can look at those 8 kind of apps, or on the other side, the 5 critical questions. And that's about how do you analyze critically media messages? It can be social media, it can be video games, it can be a brochure, it can be music, a video, TV show. It's very useful, even in the PhD level, we use that to have very deep discussion about what this message was. So it's an easy tool to use. I have some more if you want, and if you want, you can, on the website, you can order more if you need for a larger amount of students, if you want to use it. There's different activities to do with it. We're developing now a real app on a phone that people will be able to download and use it. Any feedback? Was it useful for you? Was it like something that you think you can apply? I know it's very theoretical. But again, if there's a part or even part of the process that you don't know how to do, there's tons of resources that I can send to you if that would be helpful. And examples in different places.
Your final model, your closed circle, is that available? That one?
Yes, so if you go to my website,
Okay.
I just tweeted the model, but also the publication in the beginning. I can give you the URL again. It has like really the whole, like this one.
Got it, okay.
That will have like all the resources, and if you don't find what you wanted, just contact me.
Okay.
Do you see it as something that would be helpful for the work that you're doing with the students that you're working with? Do you see, is it too complicated? Is it too, because it is a lot, looking at like René's model, which is 5 competency, I'm talking about 19 competency. So it's quite a lot to look at. But the idea is that in each part, you're focusing only on 3. And eventually it builds one upon the other. But I don't know if it's too complex or too, I don't know.
Well, if you look at it in this fashion and not as, as you build one upon another, it can be overwhelming, but I still, being that I'm not colorblind, I like the scaffolding of inner, collaboration or one-on-one with somebody else, and then bring it out to the outer part, so that it gives some semblance of yourself to everything around you.
And again, starting with whatever generation it's called, Y, me, there's different, there's so much focus on the self that it's a hook to start with the self and then starting with the other person and then looking like into the surrounding. Yeah, that's why I didn't show this model at the beginning, because I knew that it would be like, what the heck is this? So, any other questions or feedback?
What do you use for, like, is there a sort of structured way that you do critique so that people are, that minimizes the negative, like you said, you use positive reinforcement,
Yeah.
but is there like a structured way you say, all right, we're all gonna critique this? 'Cause I never took art or anything like that, but I understand that it's very common, you have to do critique as part of your regular work.
Right.
And I didn't know if there's a way to sort of build that practice as something that people can get used to doing.
So that's a work that we did with the foster kid 5 years ago, and we're still working. There is an article that it's like we're just about to publish it. We show it in different international conferences, and it's about the peer empathic feedback. And it sounds so simple, but it's really not that easy. And I'm a victim of art school critique, and I don't use that word. And I have my colleagues are using critique, and they're like, okay, so let's all the students critique. But I don't use that because I think it's destructive, and I don't believe that there is such a thing as constructive criticism. Because once it's criticism, it's not constructive. So this like combination, I don't buy it. But that's me. I might be too sensitive. But what I do is I build upon, there is the, in elementary school, there is the stars and I don't remember. But I build on that, on the sandwich feedback model, but see, sandwich feedback has criticism as well. So what we did, we changed wording. And the feedback is very easy. it's 3 sentences that starts as follows. It's what I love about your something, and you need to be specific, because if they're saying what I love about your video was the music, that doesn't help. But if you say what I love, bless you, about your video was the music because it was so funny, then I'm like, wait a second, I wanted to do a horror movie. So that's actually really helpful for me to know. Or I'm saying thank you because that's exactly what I wanted to do, so you reinforce what I wanted to do and I see that it works. So that's the first sentence. The second sentence is, if I were you, I would. And it took us a long time to find this wording, and it's very specific, and you look also in the literature about it, in communication, use the I and not, because usually what happened is that some students would say, your videos suck, and that's it. That's not helpful, of course, but if you want to be more constructive but still mean, you would say, you know, your editing didn't show the such and such, and the way you cut it, it's like really like, I don't know, whatever. That's not helpful. Because at some point you shut yourself and you don't hear what the other person. However, if you use the beginning as, if I were you, I would, it does 2 interesting things. One is that the person who gives the criticism is not just saying, your editing doesn't work, because they need to think what they would do if they would be the editor. So that's an empathic process that they cannot just bash the other person. They need to put themselves in the other person's shoe with the equipment they have and the resources, and think how they would actually give a solution. Because just say that something is wrong is not helpful. Give a solution how you would do it. It might be helpful, might not. Then the other thing is, when I'm hearing that you're saying, if I were you, I would, it's you. It doesn't mean that I need to do it, so there is the distance that allows me to actually listen to what you have to say as a suggestion, because I'm not obligated. It doesn't say that the editing is horrible, so I need to do something about it. So that you think it's horrible and you would do it differently. And then the third one is again a praise saying, and another thing that I love about your is, and again, it needs to be very detailed to be effective. It sounds easy and kind of like first grade kind of thing, but I work with different people. The worst was therapists. They were not able to follow the structure or able to give a praise without criticism. It was amazing for me. That was like mind-blowing how middle schoolers can do it easier than therapists who are supposed to be the compassionate kind, like people who would, but again, it's an interesting way. But this structure, if you keep it as a rigid, and in the foster kids camp, it took us 3 weeks to cultivate it. It was not like, and people were like going out of the room, being upset that they've been criticized. So it took time to cultivate, to understand that it's like to help each other and do positive reinforcement. Eventually, it was super helpful when we did the screening night, and people were saying about the movie, like giving feedback. They're saying, good job. Then the students were really upset and say, no, give me like a feedback. Like, just good job doesn't help me. Like, what do you think? What you would do differently? What specifically you liked about it? So they learned it so much that they expected to get it from their audience to have a more constructive way of giving you feedback. So, long answer, but that's how I use it. And I know that my colleagues are not using the same way. And it's fine, but in my classes, students know in order to make a safe space, and in order to have the ability to express yourself and know that the other people will respect what you're saying, that's the way that the feedback is structured, and I'm very, very rigid about that. So,
Thank you, that was very helpful.
I have a question. So for the purpose of instruction, do you think what is the idealness of the movie you can show? Like the students easy to use their patience, one thing. So is there like an ideal range of the minutes of the movie?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh,
But
so
the
when
editing?
you're making a movie,
Yeah.
so you can make it like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So is there ideal range of the time, how the length of the movie?
Well, it depends what was the target in the beginning. If it's a public service announcement, what I did for the last one, the Stand Up CCSU, they analyzed in the beginning other PSAs, and we saw a PSA of 1 minute, of 2 minutes, of 5 minutes, of 30 seconds, and then they decided which one was the most effective. They found the most effective one was 1 minute. So then they decided to do a 1 minute. but that's a PSA. Documentary to be the same thing. They need, as part of the second stage, the empathize, and the first stage of analyze, they need to go and research to find examples, because if they're just doing what they want, it will be what are the skills that they're learning, just that's the exploration of the beginning. But they need to rely on the sources, like what they've seen that others are doing. They don't need to do exactly the same. They can criticize it and do it differently, but they need to know in relation to something else. So you can say it's going to be a 2-minute video, but have them decide what's effective according to other similar messages that they did. Like if they created a song that is 20 minutes, who's going to listen to a 20-minute song? Right? So have them decide, because then they'll need to rationalize the other media that they did as part of their analysis and evaluation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be here saying if you have any personal questions or specific question, happy to